After a police officer's demise, he finds himself in the afterlife and gets tangled in a whirlpool of adventures with individuals he least expects to work with. He soon faces the biggest mission anyone can ever imagine, saving the world from a myriad of unearthly beings. A huge monstrous entity rushes out the door to the middle of a buzzing city. He's being chased by two men, an old cowboy named Roy and a cop named Nick. While Roy is enthusiastic to catch the monster, his partner wears an uncertain expression. Just as Nick is about to shoot the monster, a car comes flying towards him and instantly crushes him. Surprisingly, he stands up and resumes like nothing happened. A few days ago, Nick digs in the middle of the night. He wraps big chunks of gold on a cloth and places it in the hole. He then plants a small orange tree in the spot he created to conceal his little secret. The next morning, Julia, Nick's wife, wakes him up as she mentions the sudden appearance of the orange tree in the backyard. Nick does his best to divert his wife's attention, and she soon forgets about her concern. After a while, they go on their way for the day. As Nick arrives at the police station, he's greeted by his partner Hayes. The two chat suspiciously about what they've done during the previous mission. Nick wants to correct his mistake and turn in the gold to the authorities because it's the right thing to do. This doesn't seem to sit well with Hayes, and he tries to convince Nick otherwise, but he has already made up his mind. In the end, Hayes agrees and says that he'll do the same. Their conversation ends when they're called in for an important mission to capture a criminal. Upon arriving at the crime scene, Nick leads his fellow cops and Hayes warns him to stay safe. They enter the warehouse and the mission quickly intensifies as shots are fired. In the midst of the shooting, Nick chases the criminal, but to his surprise, it's his trusted partner who faces him instead. Hayes mentions he won't turn in his gold and nonchalantly shoots his partner down. Nick falls helplessly and drops dead on the ground. In the afterlife, Nick sees the world freeze as a huge hole opens in the sky. He flies towards it involuntarily and sees thousands of souls enter someplace unknown. Just as he's about to reach that place, he gets transported to a small white room where he meets an apathetic woman named Proctor. Proctor indifferently explains to Nick that he has passed away and is headed towards judgment, a process wherein a soul gets assessed based on how the human lived their life. Nick is bewildered by what he has heard and is in denial. Proctor emphasizes that he isn't such a clean cop and this can end terribly for him during judgment. Seeing his guilty reaction, Proctor explains that he's lucky enough to have the skills they need as a part of the R.I.P.D, also known as the Rest in Peace Department. It's the organization in charge of capturing dead people who escaped judgment and sending them back to where they belong. She gives Nick a choice to be a part of the team and have a chance to return to Boston or to take his chances to be judged. Upon hearing he can go back, Nick immediately accepts the offer, but Proctor realigns his expectations with the reality that he can return. However, things won't be the same as before. Suddenly, Nick shouts in pain due to the engravement of his new R.I.P.D badge on his skin. Afterward, Proctor tours Nick around this whole new world where he sees the Deados. These are the monster forms of the dead people who have escaped. Furthermore, Proctor casually tells him that Deados can't stay in the living world as this causes all kinds of disasters. Their main mission is to capture the Deados to keep the peace in the living world. The two continue the tour when suddenly, a Deado goes on a rampage. Before it has the chance to escape, a bullet makes it vanish on thin air. The person who stops the commotion is a veteran R.I.P.D officer named Roy. Proctor seems unmoved and continues to introduce Nick to Roy as the new rookie partner. The veteran openly expresses his displeasure and says that the rookie needs to prove himself first. Roy brings the unwilling Nick to a toilet chamber and, surprisingly, they come out from a bathroom stall of a shop in the real-world Boston. The older man leads his partner to his own funeral where he sees his wife Julia mourning his death. Roy resumes annoying the rookie by being overly talkative. Nick can't take it any longer and tries to get close to his wife. To his dismay, Julia doesn't recognize him and he is pulled aside by the authorities, led by the prompt of his ex-partner and killer, Hayes. He has no choice but to stare in agony as his wife and ex-partner drive away together. Confused, he asks Roy why no one can recognize him, and the veteran explains that they look completely different as a disguise. Then, he gives Nick a set of IDs, showing his current appearance. The rookie discovers that he is now called Jerry Chen, an elderly Chinese man. He is shocked by this and asks Roy about his disguise. The veteran proudly shows his ID while two male passers-by get captivated by Roy's disguise, a stunning blonde woman. The two agents enter the car with Roy in the driver's seat with his rookie partner riding shotgun wearing a disgruntled expression. They head to their next destination, their very first mission together. Upon their arrival in front of a building, building, Roy opens the car trunk to retrieve a bag of Indian food. Moreover, he explains that everything he does is a part of a strategy to capture deados and Nick just needs to watch and learn. The veteran goes on explaining how deados make everything decay around them, so they're easy to spot. He gives Nick a set of bullets and tells him that he just needs to shoot them in the head to make them vanish. They step out of the elevator and follow the blinking lights that lead them to a decaying door. Before entering the room, the partners argue about their work experience as cops. Nick feels irritated that he keeps being called a rookie despite his 15 years of service in the field. On the other hand, Roy points out that whatever length of service he has is nothing compared to what he'll face behind this door. He hands a set of cards to Nick, emphasizing that he's in charge and the rookie should follow. Then, Roy knocks on the door to greet Stanley, the room owner. He opens the door and sees a beautiful blonde woman and a Chinese grandpa who introduce themselves as health officials. Roy straightforwardly tells Stanley that he seems to have passed away. The two agents start the interrogation with Nick reading random questions on the cards while his partner eats the Indian food in front of the man. After a few moments of provocation, Stanley finally reveals his monster form. Nick tries to cuff the monster, but it resists and manages to escape by jumping out of the window. The younger agent hurriedly chases after the monster and he sees the deado fall off the building. After a few seconds, it stands up again like nothing happens. Roy has other plans as he excitedly runs towards Nick, pushing him off and making him a cushion for his landing as they both fall. They land on the deado and all three of them fall until they reach the ground. The veteran, on the other hand, seems to be enjoying himself. Nick stands up without a scratch and his older partner jokes about how durable their bodies are. After a short bickering, the two immediately face the deado, which is now throwing up random things, including a familiar gold piece. When the monster notices that the gold catches Nick's attention, it charges to attack. Thankfully, Roy fires a bullet and the monster vanishes without a trace. After the eventful mission, the two agents return to the headquarters to surrender the gold they retrieved from the monster. This piques Nick's suspicion and proposes to Roy that they have to further investigate because the deado seems to be protecting the gold. The veteran brushes it off but eventually gives in. Roy brings his partner to a baseball stadium where his informant Elliot is located. Nick shows Elliot the gold piece, but the man has no interest in it, saying it's a piece of junk. Upon hearing this, the rookie hands him the gold, saying he can keep it before leaving with Roy. A few moments later, Elliot goes out in a hurry with the gold piece. Meanwhile, Nick and Roy sit in their car observing him. To their surprise, the informant meets Hayes to give the gold. The two agents follow him until they arrive at Julia's house. There, Hayes tricks Julia into telling him where Nick hid something suspicious, and she immediately figures out the orange tree. Without wasting time, Hayes digs it out and shows the gold to Julia, implying that her husband did something unlawful. He places the gold in a suitcase and goes on his way. The partners continue following Hayes, and as they wait, they keep on bickering. Suddenly, a random stranger interrupts them as he gets captivated by Roy's disguise as the gorgeous blonde. He hands him a business card telling that he makes music videos, suggesting that Roy can also contact him for personal purposes. However, Roy frankly turns him down. Shortly after, signs of a coming deado disguised as a man appear and the partners become alert. Hayes gives the suitcase to the man and leaves. The agents manage to corner the deado inside a butcher room, but he seems unbothered and teases the partners due to their disguise. Nick triggers the man to transform by spreading cumin powder on his hand. He succeeds in revealing the deado's true form, but it soon escapes. Nick and Roy chase the monster desperately as it is out in the open where normal people can see it. The veteran is able to attach itself to the deado by using one of their special equipment, but the monster is very strong. Roy gets dragged along as it infiltrates another high-rise building and proceeds to the elevator to escape. Nick enters the building and shoots the elevator cable so that it can lift fast enough for the monster to land on it. Roy jumps on the elevator as it flies out of the building with a loud explosion. Unfortunately, the monster successfully runs away. In the R.I.P.D headquarters, Roy and Nick get scolded by Proctor for making a mess of exposing the monster's existence to humans. They're called to a room where they're supposed to be given their sanctions, but the higher-ups give them information instead. It turns out that the gold pieces the monsters are collecting belong to a dangerous artifact called the Staff of Jericho. Proctor explains that this artifact can reverse the tunnel to the afterlife. Instead of the dead being transported to the afterlife, the dead will fall to the land of the living. In addition, to make the artifact work, a human's blood is needed as offering. To make things worse, the partners are suspended with a possibility of being erased forever due to this failure. Nick immediately meets Julia despite his disguise as an old Chinese man since he feels he doesn't have any time left. He tries his best to convince her he's Nick, but she doesn't believe him and leaves leaves. Roy watches from the sidelines and sarcastically congratulates him for wasting time. In this confrontation, Roy expresses how the rookie reminds him of all the past pain and anger he experienced, but Nick replies indifferently, leaving the old man speechless for the first time. Eventually, the two make up and agree to work on the mission of saving the world together. Meanwhile, Hayes gives Elliot a half-metal core, thrilled that their mission is coming to plan. The following day, Julia calls Hayes to inform him that she strangely feels that the Chinese guy is similar to her husband. As soon as the phone call ends, there's a knock on Hayes' door revealing Roy's disguise as the beautiful lady. Hayes seems fascinated with her beauty and allows her to enter, but he already recognizes Roy. He pretends to humor the veteran and excuses himself, only to look for his gun, but Nick beats him to it. Nick orders Hayes to remove his St. Christopher's medal, and as expected, his ex-partner's house crumbles as a sign of being a deado. Nick and Roy arrest him and return to the R.I.P.D headquarters with a huge chunk of the staff of Jericho. At the R.I.P.D headquarters, Roy turns over the artifact to the officials while Nick sits near Hayes and the other deados to keep an eye on them. Weirdly enough, his ex-partner seems calm and suddenly talks about the monster's inability to hear high levels of frequency. Nick realizes too late that it's a trap. One of the things they surrendered with the gold is a half-metal core which only functions with the other half that happens to be in the very same room. The moment an R.I.P.D agent throws the core to the container where the missing half is placed, it activates high levels of frequency which create an explosion that can turn everyone else's actions into slow motion, except for the monsters. The deados use this chance to take all the gold in the headquarters and they escape triumphantly back to Boston, leaving the R.I.P.D members defeated. Thanks to Roy's quick thinking, he shoots the metal core and its effect is lifted. All R.I.P.D agents are dispatched quickly to stop the deados, and in a short while, they're all transported to Boston, including Nick and Roy, using their unique toilet room passageway. The cops exchange fires with the deados, making a few bodies from both sides disappear forever. At the same time as the intense encounter between the monsters and R.I.P.D agents, Hayes and his team of deados begin to assemble the staff of Jericho on the rooftop of the Commonwealth building. Shortly after, it starts to activate and the sky begins to open up as portals start to form. Meanwhile, two deados in disguise pay a visit to Julia, saying that Hayes asked him to give her a ride. Roy and Nick hurriedly ride a car to head to the Commonwealth building, where the main portal to the land of the dead is starting to open. The monsters tail them and buildings around them start to collapse. Cars fall like rain on the road and the buildings crumble as the portal continues to gain its stability. On the other hand, Hayes waits impatiently for Julia, and when she arrives, he finally reveals his true deado form with the help of the cumin powder. Julia fearfully screams while Hayes chuckles in amazement. They then head to the rooftop and Hayes excitedly puts the last piece of the puzzle and stabs Julia for her blood as an offering. Finally, Nick and Roy arrive at the building and they try to get near Julia and the artifact, but monsters try to stop them. Julia's blood gets absorbed by the staff of Jericho and it gains its full power. Both Nick and Roy understand that they don't have time, so they advance forward without fear, relying on each other for cover and protection. At last, Nick reaches Hayes and they engage in a one-on-one battle while Roy tries to pull the artifact apart to no avail. Nick is overpowered by Hayes, but thanks to his durable body, he's still keeping up while yelling at Roy to hurry because his condition is becoming worse. Meanwhile, the old man sees a bulldozer hanging on the broken pillars of the building, just on top of the artifact. He finds a rope and tries to pull it off at an angle that will hit the staff of Jericho. The dead start raining from the sky and Nick is at his limits. At last, Roy manages to pull the bulldozer and it lands perfectly on the artifact and himself, shattering the staff and squishing him in the process. The tunnel is back to normal and the dead are engulfed back to the afterlife. Nick ends Hayes with a bullet in his head and the deado vanishes forever. For a brief moment, Julia and Nick are given time to talk, both of them feeling fulfilled by expressing their love for each other before their final goodbye. The next day, Proctor, disguised as a doctor, visits Julia in the hospital and reassures Nick that Julia will be fine. After the hospital visit, Proctor announces that Roy receives additional 53 years to his term as penalty to his job failures. Surprisingly, Proctor bites the veteran's goatee, suggesting her happiness towards the additional years of working together. When the partners are left alone at last, Roy presents Nick with a new disguise, a red-haired girl wearing wide-brimmed glasses and teeth retainers. They start to bicker, with Roy pointing out how he puts lots of effort in finding a new identity for his partner while Nick expresses his dissatisfaction with this new disguise. They then drive together as their journey continues.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.